It starts as a chill, crawling up your spine, a vague discomfort like something is wrong, but you can't explain it. You look up, way up. Your stomach twists. There it is, towering above you, so massive it blots out the sky. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. Just existing is enough to terrify you. Megalophobia, the irrational, gut-wrenching fear of large objects. Ships, buildings, statues, dams, whales, planets, even space itself. The sheer scale becomes the monster, not because it wants to harm you, but because it could, and you'd be powerless. The fear isn't as well known as claustrophobia or even arachnophobia. It lurks in the corners of the internet, in obscure forums and disturbing image threads. But once you know about it, once you've felt it, it's hard to forget. Picture a cargo ship, rusted and abandoned, grounded in shallow water. Its hulls tower like a cliff face, peeling paint bleeding into the ocean. You wade closer. The water's still, the air silent, but that ship, it just looms. Something about the way it sits in the water feels unnatural, like it's watching you. It's dead, and yet it feels alive. For many, that's what megalophobia does. It tricks the brain into assigning menace to inanimate things. It's not about danger, it's about magnitude. About being swallowed by something so big your mind can't process it. It's about looking at something and realizing on a visceral level that you are nothing in comparison. This isn't just some quirky internet fear either. Psychologists recognize it. It shares DNA with other phobias. Existential dread, the fear of the unknown, the loss of control. At its core, megalophobia is about being overwhelmed. Psychologically, emotionally, even spiritually. It's standing before a dam hundreds of feet high and feeling your heart race. Not because it's going to collapse, but because your brain can't handle how small you are. Take the Glen Canyon Dam in Arizona. 710 feet tall, over 1,500 feet wide. If you stand at its base and look up, the walls curve around you like the inside of a bowl. You feel crushed, even when nothing is touching you. Some people have had panic attacks just from driving over it. It's not the structure, it's the scale. And then there's the sea. For those with thalassophobia, the fear of deep water, the ocean is terrifying. But for the megalophobic, it's what floats on top of it that disturbs. Oil tankers, container ships, icebergs, especially icebergs. Hidden mass, invisible depth, it's not just what you see, it's what you don't. One infamous image circulated online shows a massive cruise ship passing a tiny sailboat. The difference in size is comical, but also quite horrifying. The sailboat is practically an ant. One wrong move and it would be gone, obliterated, and even if nothing happened, just being that close to something that big, it activates something primal. Megalophobia has exploded online in recent years, mostly thanks to Reddit. r/megalophobia is one of the fastest growing fear-based communities on the platform. Thousands of users post photos that trigger that crawling sensation. Deep-sea rigs surrounded by endless water. Statues looming out of the fog. Monolithic mining equipment. Surreal renderings of massive alien machines hovering over cities. But these aren't just random images. They're designed to awaken a very specific discomfort. Some are real, and some are digitally altered, but the effect is the same. Dread. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that makes you freeze. There's a phenomenon called the overview effect. It happens to astronauts when they see Earth from space. They suddenly feel tiny, insignificant. It changes them. And that's the core belief behind megalophobia, except instead of wonder, it leaves you paralyzed. Imagine walking through a desert and finding a statue buried halfway in the sand. It's the head of a humanoid figure, but easily 30 feet tall. The nose alone is bigger than you. You look around. No roads. No signs. Just this thing. You can't tell who made it, or why, or even how long it's been here. And although you know it won't hurt you, your hands still somehow start to sweat. That's the power of megalophobia. It forces your brain to confront the idea that you are not the apex predator. You are fragile, breakable, and crushable. And it's not always triggered by man-made structures or images. Nature plays its part too. Take Mount Everest. 29,000 feet of ice, rock, and death. For climbers, it's a badge of honor. For the megalophobic, it's a nightmare. The mountain doesn't care if you exist. You can throw everything you have at it and it'll still kill you. Not out of malice, but out of indifference. Or whales, blue whales in particular, the largest animal to ever exist that we know of. Up to 100 feet long, hearts the size of golf carts, tongues heavier than elephants. They're gentle, but the thought of being in the water next to one is enough to send someone into a panic. One shift of the tail, and you're pulp. One deep breath, and you realize it's a giant from a forgotten age, and you're just a blip in its world. It's not hard to understand why our ancestors worshipped large things. Mountains became gods. Oceans became realms of spirits. The bigger something was, the more reverence or fear it commanded. Even in myth, giant creatures were symbols of chaos. Leviathans, titans, behemoths. There's something wired deep in our psyche that equates size with power, and power with danger. But today those monsters haven't gone away. They've just evolved. Now they're cruise ships docking at midnight under floodlights. Skyscrapers stretching beyond the clouds. Space stations gliding silently over a sleeping Earth. Icebergs floating like ghost cities in the Antarctic dark. It's not fantasy, it's reality. And for those with megalophobia, that reality is hell. There's a certain psychological gravity to size. You don't just see a massive object, you feel it. It bends your awareness, warps your sense of presence. It's as if the laws of normal perception break down in the face of the colossal. That's why some people freeze in the shadow of a space shuttle, or get dizzy standing below a suspension bridge. It's not vertigo, it's vertigo's deeper, more existential cousin. The kind that doesn't make you fear falling, but makes you question how you even exist in a world that permits things so big, so alien, and so wildly beyond comprehension. One haunting image posted online shows a scuba diver drifting next to an underwater oil rig leg. Just a single metal support column stretching down into the abyss like the pillar of some ancient god. The diver is a speck, nothing more than a floating piece of lint beside an object that looks more like a skyscraper turned upside down. People stared at that photo for minutes, unable to look away. Something about it wasn't right. It looked real. And it was real. But it also felt wrong. Like the human body doesn't belong near something so massive, so still, and so uncaring. And that's the reoccurring theme with megalophobia. Things that are too big to feel safe, too still to be natural, and too quiet to be trusted. Consider statues. Most are made to inspire awe, commemorate heroes, or honor the past. But scale them up just a little too far and they become terrifying. The Ushiku Daibutsu statue in Japan stands 390 feet tall. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty, You can stand beneath it, look up into its unmoving face, and feel like an insect being silently judged. The expression is peaceful, but the feeling is anything but. Now imagine it's foggy, early morning, no sound but the wind. The statue looms out of the haze, one hand raised in eternal stillness. You can't help but feel like you've been trespassed on something sacred. Or worse, something watchful. That's the real horror of megalophobia. It's not loud. It's not fast. It's slow, creeping, and silent. It doesn't chase you, it waits. And that waiting is so much worse. The fear often emerges in childhood, sometimes without a name. A kid might cry in a museum, not because something's scary, but because the dinosaur skeletons are just too big. Or they might feel sick looking at a globe, realizing just how tiny their country is. Most grow out of it, but for some, it never leaves. It just evolves, festers, and eventually spirals into full-blown dread. There are even reoccurring nightmares. People report dreams of walking through endless valleys only to find a rusted ship half buried in the sand, or of driving along a highway when, in the distance, a radio tower rises so high it disappears into the clouds. Others dream of staring up at statues whose faces they can't see, only to realize the heads are still turning. One of the most chilling reoccurring images in these dreams are giant humanoids standing motionless in the water, not attacking, not speaking, just standing. And somehow that's worse than any monster. Online artists have begun tapping into this terror. Digital paintings depict eerie, deserted landscapes dotted with monolithic silhouettes, and giant figures draped in cloth. Floating orbs casting shadows over entire towns. Structures that look like buildings but move slightly when you're not looking. They play with scale in a way that makes the viewers feel lost. Images where the horizon bends unnaturally, where a waterfall plummets into a bottomless void, and where a person stands in front of a cliff but the cliff breathes. These aren't jump scare horror, there's something far more primal. The horror of being insignificant. The kind of fear that doesn't just unsettle, it unmoors. That makes you question where you end and the world begins. Perhaps one of the most famous real-world examples of this dread is the Saturn V rocket. At over 360 feet tall and weighing 6.5 million pounds, it's the largest rocket ever successfully flown. Standing at its base, people often describe an irrational fear like they're standing beside a slumbering beast. A monument to fire, force, and destruction. Even decommissioned, even silent, it demands respect. That's the paradox. The fear isn't just of destruction, it's also of apathy. These things don't hate you, they just don't care. You don't matter to them, not even a little. And that's where it crosses into the cosmic. Outer space, the birthplace of true scale, where stars make our sun look like a candle, where black holes can stretch across galaxies, and where entire planets vanish without a trace. For many, space is beautiful, but for the megalophobic, it is the purest nightmare imaginable. Imagine floating alone in space and seeing a gas giant pass by, so large it takes up your entire field of vision. You can't see its edges. Its atmosphere swirls silently. There's no sound, no escape, and no one knows you're there. It's beauty, but it's beauty with no regard for you. And that, in and of itself, is terrifying. Even on Earth, this fear manifests in more mundane ways. Think of a balloon flying loose in a warehouse, the size of an airport hangar. The building is empty. The balloon floats in silence, but the scale of the space, echoing endlessly, makes the scene feel apocalyptic. Or imagine walking into an empty football stadium at night. You're alone. You can hear your footsteps, but above you rise thousands of seats. Massive steel frames, lights as tall as buildings. The quiet makes it worse. Suddenly you realize this place wasn't made for one person, and being there alone feels deeply wrong. It doesn't always take a monster to cause fear. Sometimes it just takes the absence of comfort, the presence of something so much bigger than you that it might as well be a different species. Megalophobia is less about violence and more about perspective. It forces us to confront what we usually avoid, that we are small, that we are vulnerable, that the world and the universe beyond it is indifferent to us. But some don't avoid the fear, some even seek it. Urban explorers crawl into decommissioned silos and cooling towers. Divers swim beneath the hulls of freighters, and hikers stand at the edge of canyons just to feel that pulse of dread. They chase the sensation, not because it's pleasant, but because it makes them feel alive. Because for a moment they remember what it's like to be awestruck, to be reminded that there are things far bigger than us. And maybe that's the real fear. The deeper you dive into megalophobia, the more surreal it becomes. Because it's not just a fear of big things, it's a fear of what those things represent. The unanswerable, the unknowable, the uncaring vastness of existence pressing down from all sides. That's why the internet is obsessed. Not just with the visuals, but with the feeling. People scroll through endless threads on Reddit, not because they enjoy it, but because they can't look away. Images of impossibly large machines, architecture lost to time, ships that look like they could crush entire cities if they shifted even slightly. It's horror without blood, dread without motion. One post showed a diver looking up at the propeller of a cruise ship. 5 blades, each one larger than a car. It's dormant, still, but the diver floats in the shadows, completely dwarfed. The caption reads, "This made me physically ill," and thousands of people agreed. Why? Because size warps perception. It becomes hard to believe what you're seeing. The brain glitches. Suddenly you're not on land anymore. You're in a dream where the proportions are wrong, where the world has been resized and you've been left behind. And sometimes this fear goes digital. Video games like Shadow of the Colossus and Inside tap into this feeling by pitting players against impossibly large enemies or dropping them into a colossal, decaying structures. The games don't just challenge you, they dwarf you. The landscape itself becomes the antagonist. Even certain YouTube videos, seemingly innocent animations or simulations, have triggered real panic attacks in viewers. A simple animation showing the size comparison of planets, stars, and black holes. People start off curious, but by the time they reach the end, watching galaxy clusters vanish into nothing next to superstructures the size of light years, they're left breathless, not entertained, but disturbed. Because once you truly understand how small you are, it never leaves you. There's something almost spiritual about it. That eerie line where horror and awe overlap, where you realize just how thin the walls of your world are, where one glance at a picture, one moment of silence near something incomprehensibly large, makes you question if you were ever really in control of anything. But here's the most disturbing part. What if the fear is justified? We've built a world where we're constantly surrounded by enormous things. Our own machines have outgrown us, and while they're designed to be safe, the illusion is fragile. A single miscalculation, one shift, one collapse, and we're reminded of what we've forgotten. Size matters. In 2021, the Ever Given container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. A single ship over 1,000 feet long paralyzed 12% of global trade. Billions of dollars were lost, all because something that massive isn't meant to be maneuvered like a toy. It's not science fiction, it's reality, and it only takes one tilt, one wrong wind, to show just how helpless we are when giants fall. And what about the ones we don't understand? Deep-sea creatures photographed in the abyss, their full length unknown because we can only capture fragments. Signals from space, blips of energy thousands of times more powerful than our sun, coming from unknown origins. Massive sinkholes appearing overnight in places that were, until moments ago, stable ground. The Earth itself is a megalophobic nightmare, calm and vast, but underneath unpredictable and impassive. There's something primal in that, something old, something that predates languages and logic, the same fear that made ancient people carve warnings into stone. Don't go past this tree, don't fish too far out, and don't climb that mountain. Not because monsters live there, but because something bigger did. And maybe that's why the fear is so persistent, because it's not just about size, it's about presence. The overwhelming sense that something out there is so massive, so beyond your comprehension, that it doesn't even need to act to destroy you. All it has to do is simply be. And that being, that still, endless, incomprehensible existence, is the root of megalophobia. It's not just the fear of the big. It's the fear of the bigger than you can imagine. It's the terror of realizing that in the grand scale of things, you're just a speck of dust, floating, forgotten, and absolutely alone.